Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofermento, and we've got a guest today. I already love this guy's energy. He is going to really open our eyes about all the possibilities when it comes to growth. And one thing, as I dug into this guy's work, what I really respect is that we are the people of ideas. As entrepreneurs, ideas are never at a shortage, but Danny, today's guest, is someone who takes those ideas and actually turns them into tangible growth. So let me tell you about today's guest. His name is Danny Nathan. After 20 years of product and technology experience, Danny has developed a habit of helping companies create new products and services and launch new ventures. In the past, he's been called a product person, a UX person, a designer, a strategist, a marketer, a creative, and a few other choice names like the cleaner. This guy will do whatever it takes to foster growth. Danny has led product build and launch efforts at an international scale. He's run countless design sprints, and he's founded multiple companies of his own. He's applied all of his expertise to a variety of companies ranging from pre-seed startups to Fortune 100 corporations. He's got a really awesome client roster like American Express, Dyson, General Mills, Getty Images, Legendary Pictures, and so many more. We're going to learn a lot, so I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Danny Nathan. All right, Danny, I'm so excited that you're here with us today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here as well, especially with the energy this morning. It's a good Tuesday.
Heck yeah. Listeners don't know this. Obviously, this will air when it airs, but you're the first interview of the day. And Danny, it's always a little rough for me, the first interview of the day, but you have helped lift my spirits. So let's get this party started by you taking us beyond the bio. Who the heck is Danny? How'd you start doing all these cool things that you're up to?
Oh, wow. Let's see. I started my career in advertising and realized very quickly that the most fun I was ever going to have working in advertising happened during ad school, and I wasn't particularly satisfied with it. And so I kind of took it upon myself to create a crash course in all things digital and what digital meant to working with brands and how brands could interact with customers and things of that sort. And that led me to an opportunity at an innovation consultancy here in New York called Poke, where I really kind of cut my teeth in the world of digital and was introduced to the world of entrepreneurship and startups, and of course working with a bunch of amazing corporations, some of which you rattled off a moment ago during the intro there. And it's just sort of been a roller coaster ever since. I've been holding on tight. I left Poke to start my own company. Had a product for a variety of different startups in the interim. Did a short stint at Legendary Pictures where I met a really awesome group of people that became my partners and co-founders at my next company. And then eventually that led to the formation of Apollo 21 almost 3 years ago exactly. We just rolled over 3 years about a month ago. And so that's been my pursuit of late. And Apollo 21 is focused, as you said, on helping companies solve problems using technology and helping organizations utilize venture-driven growth and new venture opportunities to create scale and reach more people.
Yeah, I love that overview, Danny, especially because I know, having been in the game as long as I have and you have, we know that all of these things, when you listen to podcast episodes, they sound linear. They certainly were not. You had all those twists and turns along the way. But what I really like is that overarching theme throughout your entire career. And obviously, 3 years with Apollo 21. Congrats on that milestone. That's huge.
Thank you.
But what I really love about your career arc is that it's always followed growth and scale, which I feel like are two words that we throw around so much within the world of business. And when we layer tech onto that, it's so sexy to talk about these things. But why is it? What is it about scale and growth that has really always resonated with you and made you say, this is my passion, this is where I want to serve businesses and people?
I sort of fell into it. I didn't pursue the ideas of growth and scale as kind of a career path. It's one of those things that is just, as you pointed out, has become kind of a thread throughout my career. And so a lot of my efforts have been focused on helping companies launch new products, bring new business lines to market, things like that. And when you really dig into the kind of business need that underpins growth and venture building and the creation of new products, when push comes to shove, it all kind of comes down to growth and scale, and companies trying to figure out how to become more successful, how to reach more customers and more people. And so that's really just kind of become an underlying through line throughout everything that I've done over the years. So.
Yeah, Danny, I want to ask you this really early on in our conversation here today, because obviously as the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast, a lot of listeners are saying, Brian, ask Danny about these huge, awesome businesses that he's worked with. And I can't help but think, when I think about that client roster that you've had the chance to work with, whether throughout your career or on your own ventures, and it's kind of what I teased at the top of the episode, is that we all have ideas. Like, no entrepreneur has a shortage of ideas. And I'm sure the same is true, if not 10 times more, at big businesses. What is it about the ideas that actually cross the finish line and make it out into the world? You've helped usher those ideas across those finish lines. What does it take? What's the differentiating factor between ideas that forever remain ideas and those that actually launch?
I mean, my pat answer to that, Brian, is execution, because of course, execution is everything in a world where we're all full of ideas. But to dig a layer deeper into that, a lot of it, especially when you're talking about large companies and large organizations, comes down to top-down support. And so, we talk a lot at Apollo 21 about the ideas of venture-driven growth and what it takes to foster innovation, particularly within large organizations. And it's one of our kind of hallmarks. We love working with bigger companies to help bring innovation to life. And the kind of guiding light that we have there is a set of a few principles that we ask these organizations, and particularly the leadership, to sign off on before we ever get started on a project. Because without that top-down support from the executive level, you're destined for failure. Folks have to be able to commit the resources, to understand the timeline, and to understand that innovation and growth and bringing new products to life isn't something that happens overnight. It takes time. And when you talk to particularly larger organizations and those that, see how quickly startups move and young ventures move, they want some of that magic. And we try to bring that to the table for them. But at the same time, there is the reality of being in a larger organization. And I always kind of mentally picture really big organizations almost like really big ships where, they kind of gain momentum as they move through the water, and, turning isn't as easy as just kind of spinning the wheel like you do in a car. It takes a little time to create the change that you need so that you can direct that big of a boat or an organization into the direction that you're looking for.
Yeah, gosh, I love that visual analogy of the boat turning, because it is so true. And it does show that at different stages, we have our own unfair advantages. How quick and nimble is a car when it comes to turning versus those big cruise ships? So I love that analogy.
Yes, but there's also the flip side of that, Brian, that's also super interesting. And what I think a lot of larger organizations either don't realize or struggle to take advantage of are the unique differentiators that they have at their disposal, and the level of talent and resources, and even to your point, just the number of ideas that are floating around within large organizations give them a huge advantage over what we tend to think of as startups. And part of what we at Apollo 21 try and bring to the table is helping organizations capture that value and capture the opportunities that those resources represent so that they can take advantage of them in ways that, frankly, most startups only dream of.
Yeah, Danny, I'll tell you what, I'm a big stickler for the words that we choose. And I can tell in talking to you here today that you're very intentional about these words, and it reveals so much about the way that you think about these things. You said this word combination, foster innovation. I love that because it applies a verb to innovation. That innovation is not just something that magically happens. What does fostering innovation look like?
Fostering innovation for me, kind of comes down to what I was talking about just a moment ago. It's more than just a statement of we want to be innovative or we support innovation. And, you hear a lot of companies talk about innovation. It's one of those buzzwords that you kind of can't help but just hear all of the time. And to me, an organization that truly tries to foster innovation and figure out how to grow those opportunities within its own walls are differentiated by the level of support that you see from the highest levels. So when you have an executive team and a C-suite that understands the value of innovation and the opportunities that it brings for an organization and the way that it can imbue itself across the culture, it really does have to be fostered and ushered and kind of like cared for throughout the organization so that you have these almost like parental figures that are helping to guide the growth of that culture and the belief in innovation and the opportunities to execute, to try, and to be frank, to fail. Talking about words, failure is one of my favorites, and it's one that a lot of people are scared of that I try to embrace in everything.
Yeah, I love that. As a lifelong soccer player, I really picture when you talk about fostering innovation, I picture the best soccer coaches on the sidelines. They know how to bring those things out of us. Those things live inside of us. Relentlessness, fire, passion, aggression, they live inside of us, but it's really those coaches. You talk about the top down and the parental approach to it. Those coaches are able to get those things out of their team. So I love the way that you view that. I have to ask you this because it came up in all the research I did about the way that Apollo 21 works is it's a word that you use frequently, which is solving complex problems to unlock that growth and innovation. Talk to us about those complex problems, because a lot of people listening to this will think, sometimes I've got simple problems, sometimes I've got complex problems, but we all have problems. Danny, take us there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. One of the things that I find in the work that we do at Apollo 21 is that it's always different, but there's always kind of an underlying similarity. And to me, the underlying similarity is how do we solve complex problems? And so, as I look back across the clients that we've worked with over the last few years, they've run across a really broad selection of industries. We've worked with folks in the remote guarding and video security space. We've worked with folks in the Western sports space. So think cowboys and rodeos and, hats and all of that stuff. One of our clients right now runs a commercial kitchen out of which they operate about 30 different delivery-only restaurant brands. And obviously, they all have very different problems. Thinking about how to approach connecting, professional bull riding fans to the athletes is a very different problem to tackle than figuring out how to make a commercial kitchen as efficient as possible. But the underpinnings of each of those efforts is the idea that technology can be utilized to help solve a problem. And so often we find that the work that we're doing is focused on streamlining internal operations, putting technology in place to guide how people get work done, and to streamline the types of communication that they're utilizing to pass work around an organization, for example. And whether that's literal in terms of being in a kitchen where a dish is getting prepared and passed to the next person to get packed or whatever it is, or looking back at one of our clients was a financial services organization that came to us and basically had very little documented process. They came to us and said, we're drowning in emails, can you help? And to make a long story short, what we discovered was that they were drowning in emails because their process was, when you need something, email this person. And obviously that gets a little overwhelming at scale. And when you've got 50, 60, or 100 people emailing the next person on their list every single time they need something, you can understand why they were drowning in emails. And so that simple question of, we're drowning in emails, can you help us, turned into an entire internal operations platform that dictated kind of how their process unfolded, how communication was managed, who had access to what clients, what data, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's kind of the complex problem solving, is figuring out how do we take a simple symptom like too many emails and understand the underlying issues that are leading to that problem, and then come up with a solution that we can execute within a reasonable time period to kind of help solve that problem.
Yeah, Danny, I'll tell you what, as a total tech junkie, I love the fact that you view clearly technology as the solution to real life business problems. Whereas where my head goes is I always think about maybe generations older than us, maybe people who aren't as into tech as us, who probably think back to all those times that tech was a further problem for them, where, we see so many companies applying all these different Band-Aid solutions where they end up with 30 different softwares, trying to make them all talk to each other. They probably don't. So there's probably more manual stuff that goes into it. You've given us that real life example of communication, emails being one area that you can fix that problem with better tech solutions. So talk to us about that notion of technology being the solution rather than the problem, especially because I'm sure you've seen many real life applications where it was posing a problem because there was no underlying strategy behind it.
Absolutely. It's interesting that you're picking up on that too, Brian, because there's kind of one important part of that, which is technology can provide a means to a solution, but often is not the solution itself. And, I often tell people that one of the unique differentiators for Apollo 21 is that we actually view the technology as secondary. The technology is a tool that we use to solve the problem. But if you can't define and understand the problem clearly, then you can apply as much technology as you want and get nowhere. So it really has to come down to the combination of understanding a clear-cut business need or customer need, and then figuring out how you can solve that need. And I think it's important to realize that while technology, at least in this day and age where we're all walking around with a supercomputer in our pocket, has some bearing on the solution, in large part because it is the mechanism through which we communicate and transact and learn and make decisions, it still has to serve that underlying need in order to be in the position of solving a problem. And, it's interesting that you point out kind of technology with an older generational crowd as well. And I see this with, sorry, mom, I see this with my mom all the time, who, calls randomly and says, the TV's doing whatever. I don't know how to fix it. And, it's interesting because the transition from technology as problem to technology as solution is heavily age driven, and it depends a lot on what you've grown up with and how you sort of approach an understanding of the thing in front of you that allows you to utilize that technology. And so again, that's part of what makes it so important to understand the problem and the person who's sitting on the other side of that problem, because how you go about solving it for my mom versus a client might be very different, even though they both utilize technology.
Yeah, really well said. I can so relate to that because my parents always call me with exactly that problem. And Danny, my first question to them always is, what did you do? What did you do to make this happen?
See, my first question is always, have you tried turning it off and back on again?
I love it. But I think that that's so revealing in the way that you answered that, because you said it out right there, which is technology is actually secondary then. And what you were more interested in talking about there is understanding the people and understanding the problems. And I know that that's part of what you do that's so special about Apollo 21 is you get deeply embedded within the companies that you're working with to truly understand their teams, their operations, their problems, all of those things, so that you can build a solution that works for them, which leads me to the big question of what types of questions do you ask? What are the areas that you're assessing when you walk into a business? Because I always say that people like you, Danny, you have an advantage because we can't read the label from inside the jar. We can't see things that are staring right in front of us because we're in it. Whereas you can walk in and from an objective standpoint say, oh my gosh, this is the thing. So where do your eyes go? Where does your head go? What are the questions that you're asking to make sense of this stuff?
It's different every time, which is part of what's so exciting about what we do, is that every time we start work with a new client, there's something new to learn. And it's both the excitement and the difficulty of what we do. As an example, understanding the world of rodeo over the course of 4 to 6 weeks is not the easiest thing to kind of wrap your head around, especially if you don't come from a world where that's kind of a central thread through your life. And so the questions change, but largely it comes down to where is the pain and where is the emotion for the person who is going to be using this. And so, if we think about, if we start the conversation with the assumption that, eventually we're going to end up using technology to solve a problem, there is a use case behind that. And that use case might be business oriented. It might be customer oriented. It might be kind of user experience driven, or it might be driven by business financial needs, things like that. But in all of it, there's always a pain point or some moment within the process that elicits emotion. And that's one of the first things that we try to look for is, where is the person that's there, that's sitting on the other side of this, getting frustrated? Where are they throwing up their hands? Or where does that giant smile hit their face throughout whatever process it is that we're trying to streamline or make easier to understand, so that we can focus there and help solve that one particular point. We've all been there where, I don't know, you're trying to sign up for a new service and the onboarding is terrible, or whatever it is, where you hit that point in the process and you go, oh my God, really? Like, come on, guys, did you not think about this? And that's the moment that we look for, because that's where the opportunities are in my mind.
Yeah, which I think is really revealing for all of us who are listening to this here today is viewing our businesses, our processes you picked out on onboarding. These are things that we can go through, not as us, the business owners, but as our potential customers and clients. And I think that's such an important perspective to have that, Danny, you get to bring to so many different businesses, which I agree with you. It's why you have one of the coolest jobs in the world. I always say that I have the coolest job in the world, getting to talk to awesome entrepreneurs like you. But I love hearing your perspective on all these things. And I feel like kind of the elephant in the room in any tech conversation here in 2024 and beyond is, of course, AI. AI is changing the game for businesses in so many different ways. It's making things more accessible than ever before, while also presenting some of its own challenges in various ways. But talk to us about how AI is factoring into not only the work that you're doing, but where you see tech going for businesses at a more macro level.
Yeah, AI is a really interesting thing to think about, especially today, Brian. And we've seen so much change so quickly that it's almost impossible to wrap your head around how quickly the world is changing and gravitating towards AI. And when we think about business use cases, one of the things that I see a lot is companies want AI. They want AI because it is the conversation point du jour. It's the hottest new tech that's out there. But in spite of decades of big data pursuit and the realization that we need to be storing every little user action about every person that visits our product, service, website, whatever, a lot of companies are still not prepared in terms of the way their data is structured or how their data is stored or how disparate it is across a variety of different sources so that they can make use of it in a fashion that really allows them to leverage AI for unique and interesting use cases. And so a lot of what we end up focusing on is thinking about kind of opportunities for automation and where we can utilize simple if this then that kind of structures to help streamline what companies are doing and how they're doing it as we work to build out the data infrastructure that will allow them to utilize AI in ways that they're kind of envisioning based on what we're seeing online in terms of chatter and what, of course, we want AI to be based on, decades of movie magic and things like that have kind of guided our view of what it should be.
Yeah, listeners, I want to call this out for all of you because obviously as we tune into the show 5 times a week, we start hearing incredible guests like Danny all talking about AI in different capacities. But Danny, I'm going to call this out for listeners is that one overarching theme that I've been hearing from amazing entrepreneurs like yourself and people who are far wiser and informed than a lot of us in these regards is you can't help but when you talk about AI, you also talk about data because that is going to be an intersection that is going to unlock answers for so many businesses of literally all sizes, from Fortune 100 companies to your local pizza shop. I think that there's data that we historically maybe haven't made sense of that AI is going to be able to pick up on. So when we talk about AI, of course, ChatGPT can simply do a little bit of research for us, but there's way more powerful things that we can glean from it. So I love those perspectives from you as an industry expert. I almost feel bad that I'm asking you this question this late on in our interview here today because it's the one question I knew I wanted to ask you today, and that is coming back to the actual name of your business, Apollo 21. It does certain things in my head, but I also know that your proprietary technology foundation is called Mission Control, so I'm sure that we can tie these two questions in here today. But what are the origins of Apollo 21 as a company and as a name and as your values? And then how does Mission Control factor into that? Because I'm sure they're related.
Yeah, awesome question. I appreciate it, Bryce. So you've kind of asked 3 questions in there, and I'll start at the beginning. So as I mentioned, I recently in my last job was working as head of product for a video technology company based in LA. And basically about 2 years into that effort, we took on some outside funding from a family office. And one of the stipulations of that funding round was that we would help some of their other portfolio companies assess and execute on their technology needs. And so I became kind of this de facto SWAT team leader that was deployed across some of these other companies to help them do ultimately what we now do today at Apollo 21. And so I spent about a year doing that. And finally, a couple of the folks from both the family office and some of my partners at my previous company kind of tapped me on the shoulder and said, you seem to be pretty excited about this. Do you want to think about, taking an opportunity to go and focus on this? And so that led to the creation of Apollo 21, which was born about April of 2021. And of course, when naming a business, there's all sorts of kind of greenfield opportunity to think about what you want to name it and how that name is going to both define you and follow you over the years that hopefully you're going to be around. And so, I'm a big fan of space exploration, both from, the kind of final frontier aspect, to borrow from Star Trek, as well as the the sort of design standards and the kind of cultural impact that that NASA and space exploration had, over the decades. And so as I was thinking about starting a company that is focused on helping organizations build new ventures, obviously the idea of moonshots came to mind. You can't think about startups without thinking about unicorns and moonshots and all of those fun terms. And I started doing some research about the old Apollo programs. And what I learned was that Apollo 17 was the last Apollo mission to fly, but 18, 19, and 20 were all scheduled and then ultimately canceled for financial reasons. And so given that we were starting in 2021 and the idea that Apollo 21 would have been the next Apollo mission on the docket, just sort of created this really nice alignment in my head around companies today taking moonshots and the idea of revisiting these attempts to go further in life and in business and to explore. And so that led to the naming convention around Apollo 21, which then, of course, at the brand level has trickled down to much of what we do, including the naming around our foundational technology, which is mission control. And mission control, effectively, I describe it as a box of Legos. It's a bunch of pieces of functionality that aren't really a SaaS platform, but give us the ability to spin up platforms focused on internal tooling and data management and operations and analytics and insights, and ultimately AI integration and the use of AI to better understand those data sets. And we often use that kind of pile of Legos to put together something that then becomes the operational platform for our clients. And we've used it many times over now for anything from basic CRM functionality to a platform designed for the management and execution of rodeo events, to the process management platform for the financial services company that I talked about earlier. And so it's really this kind of amalgamous thing that we can shape to create whatever we need for our clients. But because we have that foundational technology, we're able to get those platforms built usually about twice as quickly as we would than if we were starting from scratch. And so the idea that usually these platforms that grow out of this box of Legos form sort of an operational or an internal facing toolkit, that was where the notion of mission control and the idea of where do I go when I need to understand my business and my data at a glance kind of came to life. And so mission control, Apollo 21, you'll notice we've actually turned it back a little bit on our website and things like that, and just sort of let colors and names speak a little bit more to the space theme than perhaps we did previously. But you'll still catch, our little spaceman icon hanging out in the corner and things like that. So it still follows the brand around much of what we do.
Yeah, I love that overview, Danny, especially because as the son of an immigrant mom, for me, in my family coming to the United States in 1969, that was the year that we put a man on the moon. So that's such an important thing that for my family and my mom's family who came to the US, they saw, oh my gosh, look at all the possibilities. So the fact that that's still driving so much of when it comes to us being visionaries and dreamers in the world of business, you extrapolated it out, which I love that we do that in business conversations, to life, to humanity, to society. I love the fact that so deeply plays in your mission and your vision. And when you talk about mission control, what really strikes me is that you talk about it as a foundational technology. Here is the foundation that we can then build on in adaptable environments like Rodeos.
Yes.
I love how much you've used Rodeos. A dude sitting in Brooklyn, New York, using Rodeos as the example here for so many business use cases.
I learned more about Rodeos over the course of a year and change working with our client than I ever had. And I grew up in Texas. I mean, I grew up going to the rodeo and still, had no idea what I was looking at. And so, that's part of the fun of what we do, though, is we get to learn about things that we would never otherwise be focused on. Rodeo doesn't really play a role in my life in Brooklyn, as you've kind of pointed out. But learning about it has been so fun, and seeing, what people are passionate about and how it drives them is always such an exciting thing. And so whether we're talking about, rodeo and the events that underpin that and how it brings people together, particularly in the Western areas of the country, or thinking about, how we make kitchen operations more efficient. This kind of comes back to the problem solving, or the complex problem solving that we were discussing earlier. When push comes to shove, it's all the same thing. Everybody's got a problem that they need to solve. A lot of it comes down to communication, efficiency, and understanding of what's happening either with customers or within a kitchen, or how processes kind of unfold to serve a business need and to serve a customer need. And so it's always exciting to think about new and interesting passions that may not resonate for me personally, but obviously resonate for large groups of people. And it's so exciting to become involved in that and to understand sort of what drives other people, and to think about how we can help businesses create touch points that drive that passion, and how technology can be used to help people connect with those passions.
Yes, really well said and well articulated, Danny. I want to echo that, because I think it's something that we do that's so dangerous as entrepreneurs, as business owners, as people, is when we go down that path of convincing ourselves that we are so uniquely different from anyone else or anything else, that we don't have the same problems and we can't leverage the same foundations and frameworks in order to find solutions. Then we really trick ourselves into believing that there isn't a way out. So neither you nor I knew that we'd be talking about Rodeos as much as we have here today, but I think it's actually the perfect illustration that, as you said, it's all the same. When we really get down to the roots of it, business is not rocket science. So I love that we can weave those in. But
in spite of the naming, no, it is not.
Yes, I think it's so powerful, though, for us to realize that business is really about matching products and services with customers and clients who need them. And I think the more we complicate that, the more we set ourselves up for failure. So, Danny, I'm going to ask you this question that I ask at the end of every episode. I don't know how you're going to answer it, because you've dropped so many nuggets of knowledge on us here today, but what's your advice for listeners tuning in, knowing where the entrepreneur to entrepreneur audience is? They're all different stages of business growth, from people waiting on the sidelines. They're more like the idea people who haven't taken action, to the 7-figure, 8-figure SaaS owners who tune into this show, which I so appreciate all of you listeners. Danny, what's your advice for them if they're tuning in saying, gosh, Danny's given me a lot of food for thought? Where do you want to see them start taking action?
Oh, I love this question, because it comes right back to the word that I threw out earlier, but didn't really get a chance to dive into much, which is failure. My biggest piece of advice, and kind of my personal mantra, is I frame it as fail beautifully, which to me is just kind of a reframing of the idea that in order to succeed, we have to embrace failure. And ironically, it hasn't come up much today in our conversation, but this is something that I talk a lot about. You have to kind of move beyond the idea that failure is a bad thing. We're taught from a young age, and it's kind of ingrained throughout, our school years and things like that, that failure is bad. A failing grade is negative. If you fail, then you haven't accomplished the thing that you set out to accomplish. And where I kind of take a contrarian view to that is the opportunity for learning. So failure is the manner in which we learn. And without kind of applying that learning to the idea of entrepreneurship, the idea of getting started, the fear of failure will always stop you from pursuing the thing that you're after. And so if you can shift your own mindset out of the idea that failure is a negative thing and start to view failure as an opportunity to learn, an opportunity to understand what doesn't work, and an opportunity to understand what might work for your business and what might work for your customers, then all of a sudden that reframing becomes almost a guiding light that you go, okay, where can I fail next so that I don't fail in that same way again the next time around?
Yes, really well said. And I think you hit the nail on the head. It's been conditioned in us since we were children that failing is bad, but the older I get, the wiser I get. It's to your point. I think that failure is not only not the opposite of success, I think it's essential on the road to success. Yes. So I love that you highlighted that for us here today. You've dropped so many of those nuggets of knowledge that I know that listeners are going to be keen and eager, especially since we dropped so many conversations about your actual brand itself. So drop those links on us for listeners who are eager to go deeper into your work and all the cool things you're up to with Apollo 21. Where should listeners go from here?
Yeah, come visit us at apollo21.io, and everything kind of branches out from there. We're pretty active on LinkedIn. We're not super active at the moment on other social media because we've been focused on solving complex problems using technology and launching new ventures. So if you're interested in that, please check it out. I also run founders dinners in New York City once a month, where I gather up 5 founders or senior level tech people who, with no agenda, just want to meet other like-minded folks over a great meal and see where the conversation takes us. And then actually this week, I'm launching my first roundtable workshop as well, which will be a virtually hosted Zoom-based event where we tackle problems live for a small group of business folks and entrepreneurs to see how we might be able to help them solve their own complex problems.
Yes, I love that, Danny. You are someone who really practices what you preach, and you also are out there to further embolden and enable other businesses and business leaders to actually grow. So I love that you're so active in this space. You so share our mission, which is why we're so grateful for you coming on the show today. Listeners, you all know the drill. Find in the show notes down below a link to Danny's business website, which is Apollo 21. That's the number 2, the number 1, apollo21.io. I'm going to especially shout out that Danny actually doesn't just talk about all these things in theory. He actually has real life case studies on his website. So if you want to see the way that all of these things enable real business growth, tangible business growth, definitely go check out apollo21.io. You'll find that link down below, as well as a link to Danny's personal LinkedIn. If you want to get all this business goodness that Danny is putting out into the world, definitely connect with him on LinkedIn. Otherwise, Danny, on behalf of myself and all the listeners, thanks so much for joining us on the show today.
Thanks for having me. It's been a ton of fun. I appreciate it.